I looked extremely haggard and how my long hours meant I'd never find a guy. She said, and I remember the exact words because they stung so badly. "You look like you haven't slept in days," and honestly, no guy wants a workaholic hag who looks like she's aged 10 years in the past too. I went utterly silent for several weeks following that. I couldn't force myself to speak to her. It wasn't only us. She treated friends, extended family, and strangers with the same casual disrespect. Anyone other than Mom was fair game. Damon and I rightly harbored considerable hatred. We despised Nancy's brutality, but we despised Mom much more for allowing it. I recall having a particularly intense debate with Damon during which I stated that we despised her for it, referring to Mom's unflinching support for Nancy's behavior. I know it seems harsh, but it's the honest truth about how we felt. I believe Nancy's physical attractiveness contributed to her difficulty coping. She appeared conventionally attractive. I know it sounds petty to admit, but it is relevant. It is simpler to disregard insults from someone you consider equal, or even someone you regard as inferior to you. However, when someone who is commonly regarded as gorgeous tells you that you are not, it is taken more seriously. It plants the seed of doubt in your mind. I began to question my own appearance and worth. Looking back, with the advantage of hindsight and therapy, I believe Nancy's relentless urge to criticize others stemmed from her own deep-seated insecurity. She did not follow a traditional career path. She dabbled in freelance graphic design, but it was more of a pastime than a profession. She depended greatly on our parents, both financially and emotionally. Perhaps she belittled others to compensate for her own perceived flaws. Damon and I tried to disregard her words. Until we were 25, things changed radically. Our father died 8 years ago, and he was, in many ways, the glue that held our fragmented family together, despite his own role in the imbalance. He wasn't ideal, he certainly tolerated Nancy's behavior more than he should have. But he was the one who periodically attempted to mediate, to smooth things over, to keep some sort of order. His death devastated their fragile connection. After he left, Damon and I began to move apart from Mom and Nancy. It began slowly, with fewer phone calls and visits. We'd still see them at big family gatherings, the rare holiday, and maybe Christmas, but only on special occasions, if we felt like it. If we wanted to, we could make that phrase our motto. Then it became an intentional decision. We actively began avoiding them. A wall, as I've learned to call it, had formed between us and them. Honestly, I liked the wall. It provided a much-needed barrier, reducing exposure to Nancy's attacks and witnessing Mom's angry enabling. Initially, following Dad's illness and final death, we made real attempts to retain communication. We felt obligated, I think. But those attempts were really strained. Each phone contact and visit felt forced and unpleasant. During those brief contacts, Mom would almost always say or do something that reinforced our need for distance. She'd make some lovely remarks about Nancy's non-existent successes or discreetly critique our decisions, reminding us of why we were pulling away in the first place. One especially embarrassing Christmas meal, Mom spent the entire evening extolling Nancy's creative talent, displaying some very horrible drawings Nancy had allegedly done for a large client, who turned out to be a distant cousin. Meanwhile, she entirely overlooked Damon's recent promotion and my successful completion of a large assignment at work. It was a vivid reminder of the dynamic we were attempting to avoid. Damon and I eventually started making excuses, which became more complicated. We were overloaded with work. We had prior engagements. We were coming down with something, anything to avoid spending time with them. We understood that the emotional cost of those contacts far exceeded any felt familial obligation. Damon and I shared a tacit, unspoken agreement. We both acknowledged the dysfunction and implicitly agreed that distance was the best option. It wasn't that we didn't want to visit after Dad died, rather, we opted not to. It was not about insulting his memory. It was about safeguarding our own mental and emotional health. Crucially, Mom and Nancy made no meaningful effort to keep communication. They weren't continually phoning, pleading with us to come. The decision to drift away was mutual and unspoken. We were all financially stable, so there was no practical reason for frequent interaction. It was just easier to maintain different orbits. Silence was a relief. Damon suffered a serious accident a few years back and shattered his ankle. He was between jobs at the time and devoted all of his efforts and resources to the establishment of an online magazine. Money was scarce, and medical expenses were building up. As the CFO of a successful company, I volunteered to assist him in covering the bills. He originally refused, being the fiercely independent individual that he is, but I persisted. I didn't want him to spend his savings just as his magazine was ready to launch. I covered everything: his medication, the considerable physiotherapy he required, and even the cost of a full-time nurse to help him recuperate. To me, it was an obvious choice. It wasn't about the money. It was about supporting my brother, whom I actually cared about and wanted to succeed. It was an expression of sibling love and support. This gesture of charity, however, unintentionally established a hazardous precedent in the minds of Nancy and my mother. A few weeks later, Nancy called me and left me stunned. It was so bold and weird that I immediately assumed she was joking. She told me she wanted to acquire a penthouse apartment. Not just any apartment, but a penthouse, and she required my financial assistance. She defended her ridiculous request by claiming that she was embarrassed to still be living with her mother at the age of 28, and that since I had helped Damon, it was only fair that I also aid her. She carelessly forgot to disclose that she only had enough money to pay for half of the cost of this luxurious apartment. My instant reaction was a mix of disbelief and boiling rage. We rarely talked, and when we did, it was generally interrupted by Nancy's insults and hostility. And now, out of nowhere, she is asking for a large sum of money. It was surreal. We had not had a genuine, meaningful chat in years. The last time we spoke, she was busy criticizing my life choices, doubting my career, and making snarky remarks about my appearance. The audacity was amazing. I sought to understand her career, or lack thereof. She billed herself as a freelance graphic designer, although it was more of a casual pastime than a legitimate profession. She had no formal education, no degree, and no portfolio to speak of. She'd made a couple of posters for Dad's firm years ago, but they hadn't been utilized. She pretended to have a list of exclusive clients, but they were mostly family friends drawn in by Mom's constant push. It was certainly not a career that would allow me to afford a penthouse. So I gave a solid no. I told her straight out that I was not going to support her expensive lifestyle. I suggested, perhaps a little harshly, that she consider finding a real job if she wanted to purchase such pleasures. I know it wasn't the most polite response, but I was honestly taken aback by her entitlement. She took my refusal poorly, as one would expect. She went on a furious diatribe, accusing me of bias towards Damon. She screamed about how I had readily assisted him with his medical expenditures and how it was my responsibility as the eldest sibling to support her too. She entirely ignored the reality that Damon's predicament was an actual emergency, whereas hers was a self-induced craving for luxury. I tried to be calm, but my patience was getting thin. I reiterated my refusal, emphasizing that I was not a bank and was not obligated to pay her unreasonable goals. I was so disgusted by her entitlement and complete lack of self-awareness. It was as if she truly believed she deserved this penthouse simply because she was my sister. The talk quickly turned into a full-fledged dispute, with Nancy's voice reaching near hysterical levels. Finally, I said no one, and hung up the phone. I couldn't take another second of her screeching. She phoned back several times, but I ignored every call. I was finished. It was quite evident that our relationship, or whatever pretense of a relationship we had, was entirely transactional for her. She only contacted me when she wanted something, with no consideration for my sentiments or the years of awkward quiet between us. It was completely exhausting. Unsurprisingly, the drama did not end with Nancy's rage. My mother called me next, and the talk was much more aggravating. She began with a whining, passive-aggressive tone, complaining about how unfair I was to Nancy and accused me of playing favorites. She claimed I owed them anything because of my upbringing. Then she revealed an important detail. Nancy had approached our uncle, Dad's brother, who had taken over the family business, before coming to me. He had rightly turned down her plea. This exposed the extent of their desperation, and the fact that I was their second option further increased my rage. A little background: I purposely chose a career path outside of the family business. I did not want to be involved, neither did Damon. To be honest, Nancy didn't either, until it was convenient for her to pretend differently. After Dad died, his brother took over the company, and Mom lived comfortably on Dad's shares, which had been legally transferred to her as part of his will. Mom then admitted that their financial condition was fragile, owing to Nancy's lavish spending habits. She claimed that providing Nancy the money for the penthouse would make things easier for her in the future, implying that she wanted me to subsidize Nancy's lifestyle so she didn't have to. She then used the standard guilt trip, threatening no contact if I refused to comply with their requests. This was simply ludicrous, given that we were already in a position of very little interaction. I politely pointed out the contradiction, telling her that it wasn't my concern and that Nancy could get a job or stay with her until she was 35, for all I cared. My wrath, which had been building for years, suddenly erupted. I let loose a flood of pent-up rage. I told her she had no right to accuse me of favoritism because she had been doing it my entire life. I reminded her that Damon and I had made peace with her obvious preference years ago, When we accepted the truth of our broken family dynamic.